Alright, what we have here is my 2016 Ram 1500 EcoDiesel. As you can see, I've got the cab and front clip lifted off the truck as I have a blown engine. 180,000 on this thing, approximately. I do have it deleted, but I never did take the EGR system off. It's turned off in the tune. And it was a really good truck for me. Put about 100,000 miles on it in the course of a year, and blew an engine. It's been sitting for about a year, and I'm ready to get it back on the road. So I purchased a used 24,000 miles on it 3-liter EcoDiesel engine from a 2021 Ram 1500 Rebel. Reason being is the second gen EcoDiesel engines, which went from 14 to 2020 in the Ram pickup trucks, have this issue with crankshaft flex. And what that does is the crankshaft flexes or bows as it's running, I guess, and causes the main bearings to go out, wear out, destroy themselves. In any case, mine did that while I was going down the road. Leaking oil out the bottom. I'm not sure from where. It looks like an oil pan somewhere. Still cranks and still starts. It doesn't take any throttle, it'll die, and it really kicks back against the starter hard. Basically, yeah, you couldn't run it for more than a couple seconds. It wouldn't run that long. And to get it to do that, I had to overfill it with oil by about 3 gallons. And that's when I finally could get it to run a little bit, just to fire over. So yeah, that's not good. Anyways, the new and improved engines have a little more horsepower, and they don't have the crankshaft flex issue, I'm told, and get better fuel economy. Basically, just a more reliable package in general. So that's why I went with the more modern engine. I really like the truck. As far as everything else goes, it's a perfect vehicle. I think they look good. They ride amazing. They ride better than most cars on the market these days. And this is a big project, but follow along with me as we go through this. And basically, my next steps are going to be remove, obviously, this whole EGR system off this engine. And I'll see if the manifolds will still work and everything. But yeah, if I have to switch my exhaust manifolds or intake manifolds over, I'm okay with that. I can do that just fine. And yeah, just swap everything over that'll fit, and what doesn't fit, figure out a way to make it work without it, and my tuner can handle the rest. I use Mr. Tuning up in Canada. Wrote the tune that I deleted the truck with about 10,000 miles after I got it, or 90,000 miles ago, and I drove the thing only doing oil changes on it. Ran it pretty hard all the time. Towed a lot with it, and yeah, never had a single check engine light, a single issue, not a single hiccup. Didn't have the tone ring failure, none of them issues that these trucks can be known for. So yeah, definitely recommend going with him for your tuning needs on these trucks. As far as lifting the cab goes, it's very simple. When you're under the hood, you can pretty much see around the engine all the wires that are connected and need disconnected. And when they're disconnected, you know, you can see that you have it. Basically, all these plugs. Obviously, you have to evacuate the air conditioning system and drain it. But all these wires and plugs are unique on the truck to where they will fit. Obviously, we have the whole main ground and power connections there, and obviously all the hoses and stuff, and then we have transmission coolers hoses, and that's about it. Underneath the truck, you've got a shift cable, one body control module plug, and the parking brake cable right there. Other than that, it's nothing. You actually don't even have to drain the brakes out. All you got to do is pull those 2 bolts right there. That's it. And then the little plug on top of the master, and the whole thing comes off, as you can see here. Leave the brake lines attached. ABS module stays on the frame. Everything is dandy. So I will record another video clip as I get into it and figure some things out and go from there. So on this 2021 3-liter EcoDiesel, a couple problems you run into. There's a hose that runs through right here all the way through the back and comes out on this side on the 3rd gen. This is the driver's side of the truck. Goes to the low pressure EGR system. My truck is deleted, so I'm not doing any kind of EGR of any sort. Anyways, you need to put the tree in the valley from your 2nd gen engine in here. You also need to put this piece on. This is another crossover tube. It comes round through the same place that the other small tube I just talked about went through, down through the valley alongside the tree, and comes out right over here. It's one of your EGR cooler hoses. Anyways, you need that there. You'll just utilize your 2016, in my case, delete kit to block off those hoses and get them switched over. Another thing I did, my truck, or my engine I got, all the wiring harnesses were cut, so I switched my throttle body over to my 2021 intake manifold, and I'm fixing to compare them to see if they're any different as far as on the tops and stuff. I don't believe they are. You got your vacuum solenoid here for the EGR system. Looks like we've got a sensor on the top here, and one there looks the same. Sensor on the back, and one there. Looks like we're good to go. So I'm going to proceed with putting this new intake manifold back on the newer engine, simply because I'd rather have a newer part if I can at all help it. Now you have to pull this tube here off in order to pull the tree tube, or the crossover tube, out. And you can totally use the newer tube. I thought I was having fitment issues with mine, so I put my older tube on since it's fine anyways. Anyways, they look identical, so I think either one would work. As far as this Y that goes into the back of the water pump, and then back to the tree, and then up to the top radiator hose, I think they would work identically. Couple things that are different. I will have to, this bolt hole and that one do not line up anymore, so I'll have to make a tab to connect those. This one on this side, them bolts still work just fine, as well as that one there. So as far as that goes, it's pretty simple. Obviously you're going to probably want to switch the entire wiring harness over, which involves taking off all the injector lines. I've done that here. Pretty simple. Nothing to it really. I think you need like a 17 and 18, or 17 and 19 probably. And pop all those lines off. I can leave this line on for now. I had to remove or loosen this side of it so I could get the wiring harness out from under this section. But as far as that goes, that's pretty simple. And obviously you're going to have to bleed this system out. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I'm planning on just cracking the injector lines when I'm ready to start it, and cycling the key. Actually, yeah, I think if I cycle the key, the fuel pump in the tank should push enough fuel pressure through to push it past the valves in the pump and get it into the fuel rails. I'm not sure on that though. We'll see. Here's the vacuum pump. I'm guessing the vacuum pump inlet. This hose then, when it goes onto the top of the intake manifold to that solenoid and controls the EGR system, which I don't have. So I think there's one other item that vacuum hose controls. I can't remember at the moment what it is. but it's got another bigger hose going off this direction. So I'm definitely going to want to make sure I get that connected. I think it may be the brake booster. Not sure where that hose is, but I'll get that figured out. Anyways, just continuing on, I'm going to put the intake manifold back on. And I'm trying to utilize my 2nd gen turbo. I don't want to buy a new one. This one still worked fine. Had 180,000 miles on it, but it's still working good. Not leaking. Well, it looks like it's leaking a little bit. I might end up putting a new turbo on there from a 3rd gen. It's like $1,000 for a used one though. So I'm trying to avoid it if I can. And it is very, very easy to lift the cab on one of these things if you have a lift. So I would highly recommend that. Getting a lift if you don't have one before you do this job, because it'd be pretty much impossible without it. It'd drive you to the point of insanity probably. Anyways, I'm going to put this intake manifold back on here, and I will add another video clip when I get to something else that's not conventional as far as just swapping an engine in one of these would be. That'd be different than that basically. So here's another issue. There's a cover that goes on here and a sensor, manifold pressure, I believe. This is the sensor from the 2016 engine, and this here is the sensor from the 2021 engine, and this is what the cover looks like off the 2016. It goes on there. There's a hose barb right there and a curved hose that then runs up, plugs into this sensor. The newer style utilizes this right here, and the sensors don't fit. Like this sensor goes to the 2021. This sensor here will not work with this unit. That wouldn't be a problem except for the bolt sizing, bolt pattern is different. The aluminum one is bigger and the newer one is smaller. So you modify this sensor to fit. Now if you notice on here, that says 1, 2, and 3. I'm guessing labeling which connectors on the wires go, where or whatever. However, on this one, it says 1, 2, and 3. So I modified this sensor to work. I had to cut off a little ridge on each side here. You can see the marks from the grinder. And I also had to shorten up that locking thing right there that locks the connector into place. But when I plug it in, it's reversed. So right now, locking tabs, there's the locking tab for this one, the 2016, and there's a locking tab for the 2021 sensor. And 1, 2, 3 from left to right. This one says 1, 2, 3 from right to left. So basically it's reversed. I guess they want to make things as hard as possible for me. So with this in mind, basically instead of plugging it in the correct way with the locking tab like that, we can plug it in. If I can do this one-handed, we can turn it over so it plugs in upside down and it goes on. The rubber seals are these nice soft silicone ones, so they still seal great. As you can see there, the plug is in there a little crooked. It's still a perfect seal. I'm not worried at all about that. But that's because on the 2021 sensor, the wires spout out at the bottom of the connector, and on the 2016, they come out in the center. And of course, this plug is for the 2016. So I'm going to plug this in upside down, just like that, and I'm going to install the plastic cover. Now, if I have problems with this, This is not a important parameter of the engine. Crankcase pressure is more a fault warning or whatever, so I'm not too worried about it. But if this doesn't work correctly, what I'm going to do is, this is the size of hole I need in order to tap 1/4 inch NPT fitting in there, and I'll just put a hose barb fitting on there and run my 2016 sensor. I might actually do that anyways, just to make sure everything's good. But this is a way that you can do it if you don't want to tap into that cover there. Another way that you could do it, possibly, is by making a steel washer to go in between these two and kind of re-drill your holes. As you can see there, it doesn't seal. That's why you'd need a steel washer to take up that gap. But you could do that as well, and then re-drill the holes in this thing to make so that they would bolt up to this pattern here. I'm going to try to stick with this plastic piece since the sensor is the only thing that I need to worry about on it. The other hose goes to the intake side of the turbo, I believe, for crankcase vacuum. So here's the solution I found. I went ahead and tapped this thing to 1/4 inch NPT. Still got to clean it out, but got some good threads in there. Tapped fairly easily. The hole is a little small. You could drill it out if you wanted, or just go really slow when you tap it, and then run your 1/4 inch NPT adapter in there. And this right here is the fitting off of the 2016, and it threads right into 1/8 inch NPT. If I can do this here, working with one hand. So we got that, and then we have our little hose. Didn't take the clamp off. Anyways, that goes on there, and that simply accepts the sensor like that. And I'll make a bracket or something to hold that nice and out of the way, kind of like that probably. Might even be able to utilize that bolt on the oil fill cap or something maybe. My wire has plenty of reach. I can put it all the way up there, so I might actually shoot it on past and go onto that bolt there, and that'll keep it out of the way, still get a good reading, and solve that problem. That's all that is. So here is the solution I've got going on for now. Got my hose on there, fittings tightened down, 1/4 inch NPT to 1/8 NPT, hose going up into the sensor, zip tied. I had to drill a hole through the web there. Don't know if you can see that, right in there. Drilled a hole and put a zip tie through it to hold it. That'll be good enough for now. I might do something different with it later. We'll see. I like that the sensor is up above the oil, so it won't get oil in there. It'll just read the pressure, and that's it. So that was my solution to that problem. Continuing on. So the next issue we're addressing is the oil cooler. It has one plug on the new engine, and on the older engine there's two plugs. And since I am using wiring and computer from my 2016 truck, I need both of these plugs right here to be plugged in. So I'm going to switch out the oil cooler and oil filter assembly from the new engine over to, from the old engine over to the new engine. It's all completely fine, and I believe it'll still work just the same. I'm going to run it through my parts washer since it did handle engine oil, and well, this engine is blown, so I don't want to risk metal shavings anywhere, so I'm gonna remove the filter and yeah, just make sure I get all the metal shavings out of it before I install it on the new engine. So something that you want to keep track of is things like the oil cooler. Do not reuse, okay? I pulled the oil cooler itself off of this filter housing. This filter housing is what I actually need to replace. It needs to have 2 sensors, and this one only has 1. And the filter housing I disassembled and cleaned with kerosene in my parts washer, and then I washed it with soap and water. There was a whole bunch of metal sludge actually in the filter housing and stuff, and these things have small fins inside there. This is the new one that will catch metal particles, and I don't want to risk my $6,000 engine, used engine no less, on 5 minutes of work to swap this piece out with the one from this engine, the one that's known to be good and clean and such. So make sure you do that. You can clean this part. Those parts you cannot clean. Replace it. Don't take chances. So as far as the turbo connections, utilizing a 2nd gen turbo on my 3rd gen engine, there's a couple of issues. One, the hose for the oil feed has too big of a banjo fitting, so you'd either have to find a bolt from a 3rd gen banjo fitting turbo on the turbo oil feed right there, or do like I did and weld on the banjo fitting from the 2nd gen oil feed line. That works just fine. Another thing I had to do, obviously I put the coolant tree, which is what the oil drain or the coolant drain from the turbo connects to. But the coolant feed is a different story. On the other engine, there is a fitting right there, that banjo fitting, and a curved pipe that connects the coolant feed on the turbo. On mine, this block doesn't even have provision for that, so I welded a fitting onto this here, and this is the tube that runs over to the front of the engine and connects to this plastic fitting right here and goes over behind. That's the pressure side of the coolant system that gets coolant from right behind the thermostat for the heater. And then this hose runs over here to this 3-valve system that determines whether the transmission or the heater core gets the coolant. And so the turbo will always be getting full coolant flow. I welded that on there, ran the hose up through. This one is just a banjo fitting down in there, and I basically just flipped it over, so instead of coming out the back of the turbo like that under the intake manifold, it comes out the top, and I bent it a little bit to clear the fuel injector line and put a hose on there. Should work just fine. And this VVT servo, I had to bend the shaft for that a little bit to make room around my oil line. If I had thought about it before, I probably would have put the oil line on the back side of that, and then it would have cleared just fine. But that's where I had my oil line, so that's where I stuck it on there. Then the bottom line of that hose just connects the same as it does on the regular 3rd gen engine. So that's all I had to do to get the turbo to fit up. Oh, and I also had to put both the exhaust manifolds from the old engine onto the new engine, because seems like the turbo sits a little closer to the engine on the older engines, so the exhaust manifolds need to be switched over as well. Let's do a cold start on this thing, see how it does it. like it idles at around 1400 RPM until it warms up a bit, and then it would go ahead and shut down to about 600-700. It was -2 degrees last night. Looks like it's showing 39 right now, but that's because this thing has been sitting in the sun all morning.